Alright. Yeah. I just got a new screen recorder and whatnot, guys. Well, the name's Zachary Gudzinski, and I will be your host for this video. I've been recently trying out new recording software because the other video editor and software has been a pain in the butt recently, and I've been busy for the past 2 weeks, so I haven't been able to make as many videos as I would have liked. But here I am, and today I'll be talking about Bitcoin. And apparently this is about Bitcoin greenwashing. Bitcoin greenwashing. No, Bitcoin mining isn't mostly powered by clean, renewable energy, but the cult-like self-delusion of Bitcoin apologists is itself a fascinating science experiment. Okay, so what is this author referring to? Does he have any credence or not? This is why I'm going to be reading this article, because the thing is, Facebook and Twitter use more resources than Bitcoin does. So, yeah. Okay, natural news. Elon Musk just ignited a firestorm of controversy when he announced Tesla would no longer accept Bitcoin due to the environmental concerns related to Bitcoin mining and its gargantuan energy consumption. Oh yeah, to mine Bitcoin it does take a lot of energy, and over time there's probably going to be more efficient ways to do it that are going to be invented, but that's the thing. Elon Musk nowadays is the center of a lot of controversy. That's the thing. And it's probably going to be a different video all in of itself, but Elon Musk is a character that makes all these weirdos squirm for some reason. The pro-Bitcoin community erupted in a fierce backlash, claiming that most of Bitcoin's energy usage comes from renewables, and that the more energy Bitcoin uses, the better it is for the world. As you might have suspected, however, both claims are patently false. Oh, what does this guy mean by these claims being false? Because, within 30 years from now, we're probably going to have renewable energy sources one way or another, so what does this guy mean by all this? Bitcoin uses enormous amounts of energy, and most of it does not come from renewables. As you'll see here, such claims are a little more than propaganda from Bitcoin propagandists who need to keep burning more coal to power their enormously wasteful Bitcoin mining ecosystem, but they want to pretend it's all somehow green. Well, there's a counterpoint to you. The thing is, the same could be said of Facebook and Twitter. So, are you sure you want to go down this road? This author, Mike Adams, does he not realize that Facebook and Twitter consume just as much energy, if not more? So, I don't know. Let's dig into this a little bit and add in my thoughts as I read this. Bitcoin mining currently consumes over 115 terawatt hours per year, according to Digiconomist research, meaning Bitcoin consumes more energy than the entire nation of the Netherlands. Bitcoin uses so much electricity that it could power nearly half the electricity usage of the entire nation of Australia. Okay, and can you please compare that to the likes of Facebook and Twitter and Amazon, for example? Or are you going to give them a big pass since they're part of big tech? Bitcoin operations also produce more CO2 than the nation of Singapore, over 55 megatons per year, and over 11 kilotons of electronic waste. Well, you gotta consider Facebook and Twitter. Do they use more energy than Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency? If you can't answer that question, then why even complain about Bitcoin? Because that's the thing, Bitcoin is more or less similar to stocks. In fact, they're modern stocks, if you think about it. Shockingly, every single Bitcoin transaction has a footprint of using over 1,100 kilowatts of electricity, which is the amount of power that a typical U.S. household would consume in about 38 days, explains Digiconomist. The continuous block mining cycle incentivizes people all over the world to mine Bitcoin. As mining can provide a solid stream of revenue, people are very willing to run power-hungry machines to get a piece of it. Over the years, this has caused the total energy consumption of the Bitcoin network to grow to epic proportions as the price of the currency reached new highs. Well, of course, Bitcoin is going to be consuming more energy, as all mining requires energy and maintenance and stuff like that. That's a no-brainer. And as society advances, we're supposed to be coming up with solutions to make the process more or less cleaner anyway. I'm not one of these religious zealots that's harping about the environment, but the government is into this whole type of cult think anyway. So this person's probably a government patsy who believes that everything that the government says is true. Why does the Bitcoin ecosystem use about 38 days worth of household electricity for every Bitcoin transaction on average? The answer is found in Bitcoin mining, an activity that uses vast amounts of electricity to carry out proof of work processing that has no real value in the real world and produces nothing of use outside the Bitcoin system of virtual value. The entire purpose of this proof of work is to engage in artificial difficulty to make it extremely costly for anyone to try to game the system with counterfeit blockchain ledger entries. So the massive use of electricity doesn't actually produce anything except excess heat. It merely serves as a disincentive against the system being rigged by bad faith cyber operators. That's the thing. I'm reading this article, and as you can see by my reactions here, I don't think this author of this article, this Mike Adams person, I don't think he knows a single thing about Bitcoin and stuff like that. It feels like it's been researched, or that this research is heavily biased. Come on. As I said before, as we keep advancing technology, there will be ways to make cleaner energy solutions. Problem is, such things take time. You can't expect changes like this to take place within 5 to 10 years. No, it takes so much longer than that. Roughly 30 to 50 years is the amount of time it could take to get clean, renewable energy that is efficient. Because because you can't use like radioactive energy, that's too deadly. Coal and natural gas are the most reliable. But surely we should be developing other technologies right about now to start progressing towards clean energy anyway. But yet again, this seems more like a religious harping about the environment than anything else. As explained in a Bitcoin mining science paper announcement published on Eurocalor.org, Bitcoin miners guarantee a system without fraud by validating new transactions. Miners solve puzzles for numerical signatures, a process that requires enormous amounts of computational power. In return, miners receive Bitcoin currency. That means Bitcoin has managed to invent the world's most expensive and wasteful security system ever created. 115 terawatt hours per year seems outrageous. Remember, this much electricity could power about half the country of Australia. Is it really necessary to burn this much electricity just to keep Bitcoin secure? Yet again, this person knows nothing about the amount of time and research that it takes to develop alternative means of energy. Like, I get where this guy is coming from, but at the same time, I really do think he is ignorant of the fact that Bitcoin is more or less the progenitor of the new stock market that it created. Because if you're into cryptocurrency like I am, then you know that there's ways to earn this stuff for free. Well, it's not necessarily free. You still gotta spend a resource, whether that's time or whatnot, whether that be a game that rewards you cryptocurrency or streaming platforms that reward it, or social media platforms that are rewarding it, such as Torum. Because that's the thing. Cryptocurrency is part of the future. And since Bitcoin is a major part of this future, whether people like to admit it or not, then shouldn't people be thinking of ways to, I don't know, create energy solutions then, instead of just running their mouths like a bunch of zealous environmentalists who worship every tree that they come across and hug it? Because that's the thing, that's what this person sounds like, is a tree hugger. And of course, this is showing you all the information about Bitcoin and its wastes and all that stuff. But that's the thing. Those of us that care about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency, we're gonna find ways to make it cleaner. So, yeah. And plus, there has to be alternatives and other news sources that's not biased one way or the other to bring more light to this topic. Bitcoin proponents falsely claim it's all powered by 75% renewable energy. Bitcoin proponents don't disagree that Bitcoin uses vast amounts of electricity, but they argue it mostly comes from renewable energy. This claim, repeated by Zero Hedge and Anthony Pompliano, is based entirely on a flawed study from a pro-Bitcoin propaganda group called CoinShares, Much of the CoinShares website reads like it was written by Bitcoin fundamentalist zealots. The company doesn't even pretend to be unbiased or critical in its thinking about Bitcoin. Well, sorry, dude, but this article that you're writing makes you sound like the zealot, does it not? Because that's the thing. If you're coming off as a zealot, then you may want to examine your own biases, because it sounds like you're trying to support an anti-cryptocurrency narrative, if I'm correct. I digress, though. In fact, CoinShares actually writes, "It is in our interest to consume more energy, not less." You read that correctly. They want Bitcoin to use as much energy as possible. This is good for the world, some Bitcoin proponents argue. And if Bitcoin uses more energy than all the countries on planet Earth combined, that can only be good for Bitcoin profits. Oh, that's the thing, though. There's eventually going to be ways to renew that energy. But that's the thing these environmentalists don't understand, is that technology tends to evolve every 2 years or so. So, who knows? Maybe within 30 years we'll actually have discovered some new materials on Mars that can create renewable energy reserves that have a bunch of the Bitcoin mining farms use still use a lot of energy, but also recycle that energy too. Now that would be neat, but right now such capabilities don't exist. The problem is that CoinShares has zero credibility as a research organization and is wildly biased toward a pro-Bitcoin worldview. Its claim to research on hydropower sources for Bitcoin mining in China turned out to be quackery. Oh, that's the thing. Anything in China seems dubious, because much of the modern craziness seems to originate from China and make its way to the US like wildfire. This is not a political video, so I'd rather not state my political views right now. As Digiconomist explains, one can argue that specific locations in the listed countries may offer less carbon-intense power. In 2018, Bitcoin company CoinShares suggested that the majority of Chinese mining facilities were located in Sichuan province, using cheap hydropower for mining Bitcoin. Subsequent studies have, however, never been able to support this claim and or found the opposite. Confronted with this evidence, the lead author of the CoinShares paper had to admit mistakes were made. Oh, that's the thing. Doesn't China have more carbon emissions than the US? And yet, I hate to bring politics into this, but the political nut jobs in DC say that we should reduce our emissions while being complete hypocrites themselves. That's the thing. Think about it. How much CO2 emissions are caused by politicians as opposed to Bitcoin? Probably a lot more, because a typical US politician cares little for this stuff, even though they claim to be virtuous. But I digress. Bitcoin can be converted into probably several currencies. And decentralization is one way to getting rid of this centralization that these political tyrants have put us under. But yet again, while CoinShares claim that most Bitcoin mining was taking place in Sichuan province, where hydropower dominated the local power supply, they failed to account for the fact that hydropower is seasonal in Sichuan. There is only hydropower during the rainy season. When the hydropower runs dry, which happens every year, Bitcoin miners shift back to coal, which remains the predominant fuel source powering China's vast power grid. Now that's the thing. Nobody has invented a clear alternative yet, have they? So why rely on China when we in the United States, who love cryptocurrency and who love Bitcoin, can invent new ways of generating power? And that's the thing. Sounds like a bunch of preaching, if you ask me. As Digiconomist explains, the main challenge here is that the production of hydropower, or renewable energy in general, is far from constant. In Sichuan, specifically, the average power generation capacity during the wet season is 3 times that of the dry season. Because of these fluctuations in hydroelectricity generation, Bitcoin miners can only make use of cheap hydropower for a limited amount of time. That's the thing. Like I've been saying before, we gotta find alternative means of producing energy, but I don't see that being feasible in the short-term future. So yeah. Kitty, I'm recording a video. Please be quiet, little one. Pompliano doesn't seem to be aware of any of this, and Zero Hedge unfortunately contributes to the disinformation by implying that Pompliano is correct when he's actually citing a debunked, discredited piece of flawed research from CoinShares. That's the thing. Just gotta research how to create alternative energy, because it doesn't happen overnight. But this behavior seems rather typical from the Bitcoin world, where research that gets touted is whatever research helps greenwash Bitcoin's atrocious record on polluting the world with fossil fuels. Zero Hedge writes that it's nonsensical to think Bitcoin isn't good for the environment, for example. That's the thing. It's gonna take a while to create energy sources that doesn't quote-unquote pollute the environment, yet I hate to get political on something that's as financial as Bitcoin, but the thing is that it takes years to develop new forms of energy. Like, if this author is really concerned about the environment, then why doesn't he try to invent like a generator that can produce renewable energy and sell it to the world and patent it? Because complaining about an issue does nothing. And yet this guy wants to complain and whine about it. Like, yeah. Like, I have a bit of Bitcoin just by having a Coinbase account. And I'm trying to use, like, mobile apps and such to earn free Bitcoin, which uses a little bit of time. Like, it's gonna take a while before there's renewable energy that can be used, and the fact that Bitcoin is becoming more important should actually urge scientists who also are invested in Bitcoin to actually, I don't know, create a new invention to create renewable energy. Like, that's where you start. Of course, people love to complain and do nothing and expect Big Brother government to handle everything for them. That's completely nuts. Okay. Legitimate research reveals the shocking reliance on fossil fuels to power Bitcoin. The real research on this topic, conducted by actual scientists rather than Bitcoin propagandists, was published in the journal Joule in 2019. Its author is Christian Stoll, a researcher at the Center for Energy Markets at the Technical University of Munich, Germany, and the MIT Center for Energy and Environmental Policy Research. The Stoll research into Bitcoin's actual energy sources was extensive. Ulrich Oehler covered the press release about this research in this article. Empirical energy consumption model quantifies Bitcoin's carbon footprint. Oh, that's a thing. Like, no alternative means of producing energy has been invented yet. And yet, like, this guy and many others in the government, it's all preaching. It does nothing. So, instead of whining about the problem, shouldn't you be working to solve it? But that's the thing. These people rather hear themselves whine. Like, it's annoying. It explains. Stoll and his team used IPO filings disclosed in 2018 by all major mining hardware producers to determine which machines miners are actually using and the power efficiencies of these machines. They also used IP addresses to determine emissions scenarios for actual mining locations and compare carbon emissions from power sources used by Bitcoin miners in different locations. Finally, they calculated Bitcoin's carbon footprint based on its total power consumption and estimates from different emissions scenarios. These include a lower limit scenario in which all miners use the most efficient hardware, an upper limit scenario in which miners behave rationally by disconnecting their hardware as soon as costs exceed revenue, and a best guess scenario which accounts for the anticipated energy efficiency of the network and realistic additional energy losses from cooling and IT hardware. Our model reflects how the connected computing power and the difficulty of Bitcoin search puzzles interact, and it provides a high precision of power consumption since it incorporates auxiliary losses, says Stoll. However, the precision of our results strongly depends on the accuracy of the input data, such as the IPO filings for hardware characteristics. The carbon emissions strongly depend on the assumed carbon intensity of power consumption. That's the thing. In order for carbon emissions to be reduced, people do need to invent other means of creating renewable energy outside of wind and hydroelectric power and solar power, respectively. But alas, no one has done it yet, so stop complaining and start getting to work on these things if you think it's really that important. And that's the thing. Stuff like this is interesting to someone like me because not only am I into cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, but I'm also trying to get my A+ certification and my Net Plus certification because I plan on working in an IT job soon. So, to me, Bitcoin technology is actually good for those of us in the IT field. Additional research carried out by University of Cambridge scientists pursued an even more detailed map of energy usage that powers Bitcoin mining. It found that China accounts for about 65% of Bitcoin mining. As Digiconomist explains, the mapping of these regions reveals that, indeed, the vast majority of Bitcoin mining is taking place in the highest polluting regions of China, including in the dry season where the local grid is powered by coal, not hydropower. Well, that's the thing. No one has invented an alternative to use yet. Shh, little kitty cat, shh. I'm trying to do a video right now. Yeah, don't mind your distraction though, little kitty. Because it may actually attract more viewers hearing you meow. Okay, besides that, let us continue. Using a similar approach, Cambridge in 2020 provided a more detailed insight into the localization of Bitcoin miners over time. Charting this data and adding colors based on the carbon intensity of the respective power grids, we can reveal significant mining activity in highly polluting regions of the world during the Chinese dry season, as shown below. On an annual basis, the average contribution of renewable energy sources therefore remains low. When Cambridge subsequently surveyed miners, also in 2020, respondents indicated only 39% of their total energy consumption actually came from renewables. Well, that's the thing. Gotta create more sources for renewable energy. And it's not going to happen with government mandate. And if this guy has an anti-Bitcoin narrative like I think he does, then perhaps he should stop whining altogether, because eventually we're going to create technology that's going to solve most of these issues. But until that happens, we're still going to be using coal-powered electricity since it's the most reliant. So if you're not contributing to inventing a new source of power and you're complaining about this, then just shut up and let actual smart people solve this issue, because I myself would love to see a scientist that doesn't have a political bias actually create renewable energy. And plus, he or she may actually become famous for doing so. It's possible, just gotta kick the government to the curb in order to do it. As the Economic Intelligence Unit also explains, Bitcoin miners can't rely on hydropower because it's both seasonal and unpredictable, even during the wet season. Bitcoin miners have adapted to using energy sources seasonally, utilizing mining facilities in those two provinces during the wet season and relocating to Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang, where coal and wind power sources are abundant in the dry season. In addition, the largest Bitcoin miners in China are moving away from hydropower because it's not reliable, as explained in an article on Medium.com. Today, Chinese mines not only seek out cheap electricity, but also stability and scale. So instead of siphoning surplus electricity from hydropower stations in Sichuan, say during the rainy season, larger mines are now partnering with local governments for a steady but discounted supply of energy from the state grid, China's state-owned electricity utility. Oh, like I said before, until a clean energy source is invented, where you basically have scientists in a lab creating a reactor that creates renewable energy by manipulating various atoms and such, it's gonna be hard to have that renewable energy, and I'm pretty sure there's scientists that are working on that. But until that day comes, please stop the holier than thou, what about the environment type of speeches. Because I'm pretty sure behind that well-meaning facade is a bunch of hypocrisy. And of course, they're showing you how much energy is produced by these countries. As you can see, only 39% of Bitcoin mining comes from renewable energy, not 75%. The Cambridge survey of Bitcoin miners reveals that even in their own self-reporting by Bitcoin mining groups, only about 39% of Bitcoin energy comes from renewables. That's far from the 75% claimed by Bitcoin advocate Anthony Pompliano, and it debunks the entire Bitcoin is clean narrative from self-deluded Bitcoin propagandists who seem to cling to a cult-like mentality of filtering out legitimate data when it comes to supporting their Bitcoin profits, no matter what contortions are required. Now, the thing is, think about how much energy Facebook and Twitter use daily. If Facebook and Twitter consume more energy than Bitcoin, then you have no right to complain. Heck, even Amazon probably consumes just as much. In this case, it turns out that Elon Musk is right. Bitcoin is dirty. It's not even the CO2, since CO2 actually helps grow plants and produces food from food crops. Rather, it's the mercury pollution and particulate pollution that comes from coal. It's also the environmental destruction and ecological degradation ties to coal mining operations. Pollution is the real factor that matters here, since China's coal emissions are carried by winds blanketing North America. This means pollution in cities like Los Angeles is actually derived in part from coal-powered Bitcoin mining in China. So what are you getting at here? I know that China has the highest emissions in the world, because that's unfortunately where most of the production of our goods comes from. And China is also one of our global enemies besides Russia. So what are you getting at? And it begs the question, all for what? Despite its humble beginnings as an experiment in decentralized money, Bitcoin is now in an irrational, Ponzi-like bubble rooted in FOMO, desperation, and extreme denials of reality. While a stable, decentralized cryptocurrency that actually maintains price stability has real utility in terms of its portability and decoupling from the fake fiat central banks of the world. The mass hysteria surrounding crypto speculation and get-rich-quick vision of greed are sure signs that this digital tulip mania is a castle made of sand. When it topples, there won't be much left to salvage. Oh, brother. That's a thing. Yes, by trying to earn Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency, I do realize that it's similar to the stock market, and since it's a digital asset, it can be hacked into and tampered with. That I'm aware of. Yet again, this guy doesn't realize it. There are ways to create solutions to this problem that he's talking about. And like I said earlier in this video, it seems like he doesn't even understand that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency is basically the evolution of the stock market. So could there be something similar to what happened during the Great Depression involving cryptocurrency? Could be. There could be that possibility. But it's from the history of the Great Depression in the stock market that we learn how to secure cryptocurrency altogether, and also experiment and find new ways of creating energy to make it a cleaner resource. Like that's a no-brainer. In the end, Bitcoin will be viewed as a fascinating computational and psychological experiment that expended unimaginable fossil fuel resources only to end up leaving most participants penniless. When the madness finally bursts and people come to their senses, Bitcoin's end game value will be almost nothing compared to the vast resources the grand global experiment has unwisely consumed. But that's the thing, this guy isn't really thinking about the future now, is he? Because the thing is, we're gonna invent new energy sources. We're gonna invent most of that stuff in 20 to 30 years. Sooner, if somebody's actually serious about it and is not all for the government propaganda of clean energy within 10 years or so, which is absurd. No one on Earth will be better off when this scheme runs its course, because Bitcoin produced nothing other than pollution, electronic waste, and excess heat. It did not power any actual work, and it did not produce housing, transportation, food, or consumer goods of any kind. It did, of course, result in a mountain of electronic waste, and it consumed the attentions of millions of human beings who bought into the digital tulip mania scheme. Yet again, this guy doesn't seem like he believes that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is literally the evolution of the stock market. This guy has no idea that humans can also create solutions to this quote-unquote pollution that he's talking about. Because Bitcoin isn't perfect. I'm pretty sure that there is clean energy being used that's renewed and whatnot that Bitcoin is utilizing, but we also gotta realize that there's probably a source of energy that hasn't been invented yet in order to make it more efficient. This is all ridiculous, just dissing Bitcoin like this. But I digress. But like all such manias, this too will pass, and in the end, as people come to their senses, many will ask the obvious question: we burned how much coal to fool each other into thinking we were all getting rich? Well, bub, like, you gotta realize that, though, like, wearing masks because of a virus with a 99.97 survival rate is ridiculous too. So I'm wondering when that mania will pass and when people are going to be willing to look into the COVID vaccines, because I'm seeing more mania over that than Bitcoin. So you ask me, bub, why are so many people eager to get a vaccination that hasn't been thoroughly researched yet, as opposed to Bitcoin, which seems like it's an evolution of the stock market and may actually encourage the next scientist to create new energy resources, and that scientist may have his or her name recorded in history. So, seriously, you're bringing nothing to the table but complaints, and you're not even providing a solution either. Oh yeah, and this guy does have a disclaimer as well. I own no Bitcoin or Bitcoin-related assets. Whether Bitcoin goes up or down in value is irrelevant to my personal finances. I previously used solar power to mine Bitcoin, which I promptly traded in for physical gold. That's the thing. Like, already from this article, before I read this disclaimer and before you saw it, that this guy has no interest in Bitcoin. So he's another one of these Kevin types that complains how Bitcoin and NFTs are harmful to the environment. Well, you know, bubs, you can just try to invent a new source of energy, right? And of course, there's probably going to be people in the comments here basically telling them otherwise. Yeah. Like, I see, like, various comments. Okay. Yeah, there's several different comments that you could read here, which I'm not gonna read. That's the thing. I'm just gonna stop right here and you guys can read the comments and such. Because the way I see it, like, if there's a way to make cleaner energy for this to be good for the environment, then stop complaining and actually do something. Like, in all areas of life, that is the biggest thing that gets to me. If you are not contributing to the solution to make Bitcoin mining more environmentally friendly, as these green cultists preach, then why are you bothering to do anything at all if you're just going to complain and waste, like, space on Facebook and Twitter and all these other places that consume much more energy than Bitcoin does? Well, thanks again for watching, folks. I'm your host, Zachary Gedzinski. You can find this video on YouTube under Zen Variety, BitChute under Zen Variety, Odyssey under Zen Variety Mix, and Rumble under Sotarmix. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, and God bless.